Hello, my name's Adele Weggett and this is my assignment for EDC1200. I apologise in advance for my croaky voice. I've got a really bad flu, so I'll try and speak as clearly as I can. The topic I've chosen is based on an article from the Sydney Morning Herald, titled Schools to Teach Aboriginal Culture. The article revolves around a proposal for the Australian school curriculum to be changed and include an Aboriginal perspective. This means education inclusive of Indigenous views and customs. The curriculum for English, Science, Soc and Maths will all be reviewed, and an example of ways a curriculum will change include teaching counting methods used in Indigenous tribes and presenting students with actual Aboriginal statistical data in lessons. This change has been pushed by Aboriginal leaders who believe that the current curriculum does not educate on current Indigenous culture but rather Indigenous history. The shift is hoped to improve Aboriginal educational standards and provide all school children with a knowledge of Indigenous culture and issues. This is the image included with the article, and it shows members from the Wiggle supporting an appeal called Hands Across the Nation. This appeal was set up by the Australian Literacy and Numeracy Foundation to promote awareness about the poor standard of Indigenous literature skills. On the Foundation's website they show a statistic stating that 4 out of 5 Indigenous children living in remote communities can't read at the accepted minimum standard, so you can see how an issue like this would support a move in better education for Aboriginal children. To give you a better understanding of the proposal, I'll give you a quick overview of the people involved in the move. Firstly, there is Peter Hill, the Chief Executive of the Australian Curriculum Authority. He is the one who will present the proposal for this new curriculum. There's also Peter Buckskin, who is the Dean of Indigenous Education and Research at the University of South Australia. The Sydney Morning Herald quotes him as being a supporter of this initiative. There's also the Federal Education Minister, Julia Gillard, who has received a petition supporting this change. So how and why has this new curriculum been formed? The criticism for not having Indigenous leaders involved in the development of Australian curriculum has sparked the change to include an Aboriginal academic leader on the authority board. After debate and review, the disciplines included in the current school curriculum will be reformed to include an Aboriginal perspective. Dr. Hill called this addition to the curriculum a mandatory Aboriginal perspective, which in his opinion will be the first national curriculum. I've picked this topic specifically because I feel it relates directly to national identity. I've chosen to quote a line from the textbook Culture and Identity by John Austin, as I think it explains Australia's national identity perfectly. As with any identity, our national identity is constantly evolving, but because we are such a young nation, we're still altering the foundations of our national identity. If this change is passed, and we do include Aboriginal culture in our school, we will change all future materials and approaches. This is a controversial proposal, so we will see a lot of debate surrounding it. The shift will change our views and opinions on race, education and the way in which we perceive our federal government. Ultimately, the nation's location on the identity axis will change. Our collective identity will also change. A sense of belonging in the larger identity, whether it be the teaching profession, parent group or nation as a whole, will alter. This issue also touches on difference. The first difference is between the way in which Indigenous children are taught and the way in which we currently teach. The second difference is between the understanding of Australian history from an Aboriginal perspective and the typical primary school student's understanding of Australian history. Another difference is that between the standard of literacy skills in remote Indigenous communities compared to the level of literature skills in the rest of state schools. The final difference I am pointing out is Aboriginal children having a vast knowledge of culture, whereas the knowledge of Aboriginal culture amongst other children is mainly historic. I've chosen this issue of introducing Aboriginal culture and perspective into the curriculum because I want to draw educative experiences from the following possibilities. I hope to promote knowledge of difference, national identity and collective identity. I also hope that this issue will open a discussion that will form opinions as well as reform existing views. I'm hoping that children will ultimately shift their identity in some way once they really think about what this change means. I would like to draw on the issue of discrimination in regards to Aboriginal culture. I live in Cairns, which is a fairly multicultural town, so I would like to take the advantage and show children ways of embracing the multiculturalism around them and promote interest in other cultures. I have chosen the age group of late primary school children, that is, between years 5 and 7. I think this is a suitable age group, as the views they currently hold are mainly formed by what they have experienced in school and at home. They are old enough to know about difference and recognise the differences between themselves and others. They are also at an age where they know about discrimination. Children at this age group are highly influential, so they've built a strong set of opinions and values, but they are rapidly moving along the axis of identity. By now these students have an idea of how they learn best, be it visually, writing or listening, and so they will be able to relate to others who learn in their own different ways. Finally, these children may be school leaders, and with the knowledge of difference and diversity, they will be better role models for the younger ages. There are a couple of points that need to be considered when bringing up this topic in a classroom environment. We as educators need to remain unbiased. We also need to create a stimulative and rich experience to really engage young minds and keep them listening and learning. We need to always touch back on difference and diversity to reinforce the meaning of this issue. I will explain why I would not show this specific article to children or parents, but rather use it as a muse. Dr. Hill states that there is a point in society when we have to come to terms with our past and what we have inflicted on Aboriginal people. This is a very biased and quite blunt view, and does not correlate with the considerations I mentioned before about remaining unbiased. I want this topic as curriculum to promote an open environment so that children can form their own views and opinions, and I don't want to assume any prior knowledge of this issue on the children. These are some of the ideas I've come up with for teaching this topic as curriculum. I've named this curriculum One Education for All. Firstly, I would like to introduce some key terms to the class to help them better understand the context of this topic. Culture. I'm using a definition I found on the Education Queensland website that defines culture as a system of beliefs, assumptions, sentiments and perspectives. Secondly, the term cultural diversity. I quite like this definition because it talks about cultural diversity as a positive, which is the impression we want to give children. Difference. What sets us apart from others? Individual identity. This definition is from the text Culture and Identity. And finally, collective identity. This is a guideline for how we may start a discussion in the classroom. The topic of national education. What do we know about the way Indigenous children learn, and how does this compare to the way we learn in this classroom? What's different and what's the same? What makes our nation great? We want to reaffirm the idea that Australian education is diverse and non-discriminative. So let's talk about why the Australian national identity is such a great collective identity to belong to. We strive to include everyone, hence why we're developing a new and improved multicultural curriculum, and we don't discriminate. This is why we can embrace difference in Australia. We feel like we belong in this group. We could be talking about the group being a classroom, a family, or the nation as a whole. This feeling of belonging is a collective identity. How can we make others feel like they belong? What can we avoid to make sure everyone experiences this sense of belonging? To further enhance the educational experience, include some fun activities in this curriculum. This topic relates directly to multiculturalism, so we can learn some cultural dance, create some Aboriginal art, or study stories from the Dreamtime. We can use the resources available to us to teach the concept of one education for all. NAIDOC Week is run once a year, but the activities involved can be used at any time of the year. In Cairns, we have a theme park dedicated to educating the community about Aboriginal culture and history. Plan an excursion to your local cultural centre or attend a cultural festival. If you're a creative and innovative person, why not create your own diversity-themed week or day? Plan some multicultural activities or see if you can find an inspirational person to come in and talk to the class. The final way in which I would teach this topic is to organise inter-school activities, such as an inter-school sport day or joining together to celebrate something such as NAIDOC Week. In my community there are various schools that consist mainly of Indigenous children. The opportunity to integrate these groups of children is one that will promote anti-discrimination, diversity, and let children learn from each other. Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you've enjoyed learning about my topic choice and how I would use this issue as curriculum.